Cypress, the Counterintelligence podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we're live. Scott Sparks, how are you doing this afternoon?
Glorious, Ryan. It's it's a nice Friday afternoon, getting ready for the weekend. So perfect place to be.
You know, I've noticed there's a trend, Scott. You really do enjoy these late Friday afternoon podcasts.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that I enjoy them so much. I mean, I always enjoy these podcasts, but I think that I end up being like the last man standing, available to pinch hit, on Friday afternoons is what it boils down to. So, gotta go through the door right when it's open. So I'll knock it out.
Yeah, and hopefully this one isn't the 7-hour marathon that you had with the CW5 panel that we had recently.
Well, I don't know. We got like a member of the Marine Corps warrant panel that's about to hit. So, I mean, maybe that's something that I got to be ready for, right?
You're right, man. I hope you ate your Wheaties today, because we have got a great guest, a guest that I've been hoping to get on the show for at least a year. And the timing just hasn't worked out. But, we finally have him on, and it's leading to a very exciting panel discussion that we're going to have with the United States Marine Corps CI professionals on March the 21st. So we had to get a story in real quick so that everybody can go back and hear Nick's story and know where he came from and what he's all about, establish his bona fides. And then, that way we can have a panel discussion and not have to get back in the background. So this is a good time. I'm very excited to introduce to our audience, Nick Vidulich. Nick, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Scott, how are y'all doing?
Yeah, super happy to have you on, Nick. This is a cool day.
Yep.
I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm going to apologize up front. I've got this nagging cold, so if you see me, if you see me coughing in the background, I'll be fine. If I fall out of my chair, I promise I'll get back up. So Nick, you've had a great career. We've talked about it a little bit in bits and pieces, but I really want to dig into your story and find out how it all unfolded. So, probably going back to junior high, maybe too far, but, leading up, like, what was that decision process like, entering into the Marine Corps and then, becoming CI?
No, so I'll tell you honestly, Ryan, I did not have a great career, right? I had a real up and down career. I think, like, if anybody takes one thing away from listening to me today, it's like, you can mess up a ton of times and still end up doing really good work for the country, for the DoD, for the IC, for your company. My career is a comedy of errors, right? And I'm really fortunate that I emerged out of a lot of that silliness in like the safe and happy place where I am today. But it was a real up and down rocky road for a lot of that. So I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. My parents are both teachers. My whole family are teachers. I'm the only not teaching adult in my family, including my wife. And that was what I was going to do. It turns out that you have to go to high school and not spend your whole time drinking and smoking weed and chasing girls. So that was the end of high school. I took the ASVAB to get out of the first 3 periods of school. Turns out I did pretty well. It was the spring of 2001. Nothing bad was ever going to happen, right? I was going to join the Marine Corps. I was going to spend a little time. I was going to get a little discipline. I was going to go on some cruises. And graduated in the spring of 2001. September 11th happens, and there I am sitting with a bunch of my friends, my family, wondering what I'm going to do. Basically, nobody in my family served. My grandparents, both my grandpas were in the service, but service is not a part of my family, or really a part of my community. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I just know that I knew that 9/11 happened. I was kind of like, at 18, I was already kind of a burnt out little punk, right? And so I had friends of mine reaching out, like, I'll get you to Canada, we'll get you overseas, we'll get you out of this. But like looking back, right, I retired after 22 years, and that was 5 active and 17 reserve. And the Marine Corps really truly saved my life and set me up for where I was. And I think, I recruited a bunch of guys into the CI HUMINT community in the Marine Corps before I left. And I tell them the exact same thing that I'll tell you all today. I've told them for the last 10 years. It's the greatest job in the Marine Corps. I spent the first 12 years as a SIGINT. So I spent my whole career in Intel. And it was really humbling, right? So I spent my 5 years active duty doing like real strategic intelligence work as a child. No idea what I was getting myself into. It was immediately post 9/11. Like we were just after getting into Iraq. And there I was actively targeting, doing national, international, strategic level missions. And I legally couldn't drink in the US anymore, or at that point, which was wild. Did the classic Marine Corps thing and married someone too early and got them pregnant too early, and it wasn't in that order. And got divorced too early. And then met the love of my life after that. And we both got off active duty. So she was in the Army. My wife was in the Army. I don't remember the Army MOS codes anymore, but so she was a SIGINTer as well. We worked together in Germany. And she's from Iowa. I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado is beautiful, and Iowa's a great place if you're from there, and tough if you're not. And so as we're talking, we're getting ready to leave Germany. We're like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go to Iowa. We're going to go to Boulder. We're going to go someplace else. And we both decided to come back to where I was from, come back to Boulder. And I was done with the Marine Corps after my first enlistment. I hated it. I was a terrible active duty Marine. I was a really good employee. I was a really good 9 to 5. You could trust me to get the job done. And then anything outside of that, I was a young man outside of my depth. So we moved back to Colorado. We both get off active duty. She immediately is recruited into the Guard. Starts recruiting for the Guard. Is really successful. I'm out digging ditches, building fences, doing some part-time security work, waiting for the new GI Bill to kick up. And an old friend reaches out to me and says, here's the deal. The surge is getting ready to happen. They're going to recall everybody. So either you're going to be a skiff guard in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, or you need to find yourself a reserve unit, or you need to shoot off a toe or something, right? And there was a reserve intel unit 45 minutes down the road from me at Buckley Air Force Base, now Space Force Base, in Aurora, Colorado. So I went down there, I interviewed with them, seemed like it was going to be a good fit, joined up with the unit, and it was like a whole new world opened up to me, right? I don't know if y'all have met Marines, but we're a tough group of people to be around. And being in the reserves gave me the opportunity to be with them for a weekend and remember why I both loved and hated the Marine Corps, and then take a few deployments. And so, again, it still was a SIGINTer. I think at that point, and I may be wrong, don't fact check me, but I think I was the only SIGINTer in the Marine Corps Reserve at that point. Immediately went on orders and spent a year doing counter-IED work, doing the post-blast analysis, and that was at the height of the EFP epidemic in Iraq, right? Which was killing everybody. And so suddenly, I had been off active duty for a year and a half, maybe 2 years at that point. And I was like, oh, this is this is what it's like to contribute again, right? This is what it's like to feel like you're actually doing something. And I had just, for maybe the first time in my career, a senior enlisted and a CEO, like a platoon commander, a company commander, a battalion commander, an I&I, who were just there they just wanted to see me succeed. So they got me those orders. When that year or so was done, they brought me off of orders. I got a lot of just amazing stuff done. And moved right back into being a reservist when I started to college. And so went to CU Boulder, was originally an engineering student. Was a platoon sergeant at the same time, was raising my only kid at that point. Went through Calc 1, went through Calc 2, failed Calc 3 miserably, so bad that I was like, I need to deploy. And so I got deployment orders with the Special Operations Task Force West in Afghanistan. And so I got to go out there and deploy with what was at that point MARSOC, but is now the 1st Raider Battalion, and be their direct support SIGINT element for the western third of Afghanistan. And it was amazing. It is one of those things, right? You look back on your career. A lot of people look back on their career and can name all the. Actually, let me ask you a question before I say this. Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast?
Oh, gotcha. You're a Marine, man. We expect you to cuss.
Well, I figured I'd ask, right? I'm trying to be polite.
No, go for it.
You know, a lot of people, especially in the service, look back and they're like, oh, well, this is the first time I met a dumb fuck. And then the second, right? And our entire Special Operations Task Force, at least the entire intel section, was built out of reservists. And it was the most professional, most well-educated group of folks maybe I've ever worked with in my entire career. And I'm extraordinarily lucky. I deployed a couple of times. I went to a few schools. I did some cool sets of orders. And every single time I was just working with just the greatest group of folks who knew their jobs inside and out, who were just so professional. I never once ran into, at least in my core group, in doing intel work, I never once ran into anybody who made me second guess what I was doing. And we did some incredible work on that deployment in Afghanistan. This was 2012, and so we were doing the Afghan local police mission. A lot of by, with, and through stuff. And I was doing some SIGINT collection. I was doing mostly SIGINT analysis. At some point, I think, our intel chief recognized that I was kind of losing my mind and sent me to the teams to do some collection and analysis work with the teams. And it was amazing. And it was also, like, in retrospect, emotionally, not the best for a sensitive kid from Boulder. Right? So I came home, I redeployed, and being a reservist, I have a tremendous amount of respect for our active duty counterparts. But the day after you come off orders as a reservist, you have to go back to a real life where they don't care, where you have to get a job or you have to go back to school, or they are not prepared to stick you in the training section for a year and let you kind of sit and figure your stuff out. You have to go back to being a full-fledged adult with a mortgage. And so I was good with that. I got back in, I think it was maybe November of 2013. My wife and I decided to have kids. We find out New Year's Eve. She's pregnant. We find out a week later it's twins. And then I go out for a run, collapse on my run, can't breathe. Whole body is just on fire. I have something called sarcoidosis, which is autoimmune disorder that normally presents as little bumps in the foreheads, little bumps in the shins. It's pretty benign for most people. And if you have a real extreme stress response, it ends up being, like, for me, golf ball to apple size calcifications in your lungs and joints. And so I thought I had cancer. And it was the scariest time in my entire life. I just found out I'm going to be a dad again, right? I'm going to be a dad to twins again. Well, not twins again, but I'm going to be a dad again. It's going to be to twins. And like, I'm meeting with oncologists. My CO and my senior enlisted from my reserve unit take a day off a drill, drive up to my house, just like 45 minutes, an hour away, and sit with me. Or just like, you don't worry about this. You worry about being healthy, and we'll worry about your Marine Corps career. Which is one of the greatest kindnesses that anybody's ever done for me, right? And that guy, that CEO, ended up being our battalion commander, ended up being the FHG commander for Marshal Res, ended up being I think he may still be the Durant for the Marine Corps. Great dude. Somebody who really like stuck his neck out for me and protected me when I was at what was the scariest time in my life. Scariest time for me in my life. And so like in a 3-4 month period, I go from kind of dealing with the high of a post-deployment, ignoring the PTSD, ignoring the stuff. And I go like pregnancy, twins, dying, maybe cancer, right? And like I downward spiral. And again, I'm in one of those places where like I'm extraordinarily lucky that I had a group of people, Marines and non-Marines alike, that were there and had my back. Came out of it great. Took steroids for a couple of years, cleaned it right up, did a bunch of physical therapy, got right back in the fight. Right when that happens, you know, they tell me, the Marine Corps tells me, that not only are they not going to continue moving forward with having SIGINT in the reserves, there were 3 of us at this point, but I need to choose an MOS. And I love being SIGINT. I would talk to your shoes all day, every day, right? I love SIGINT Marines. And so I was given a choice. It was like, get out of the Marine Corps. And at that point, I was 11 and a half, 12 years in. And I loved it. Suddenly, like I found this love for the Marine Corps, right? Every single person that was around me was just the best dude I'd ever met. Or changed my job, that move. And through my entire time in the reserves, the people that I was close to were always the CI HUMINT Marines. There was a deck that was co-located with the analyst company that I was a part of. And so we were always close. And there was a freshly minted, you know, he and I knew each other when I was a baby corporal, and I believe he was a sergeant, maybe just recently promoted to staff sergeant. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Navy. And he recruited me and he brought me into the MOS. He boarded me, and you know, I listened to you interview Dan Williams, so I know you guys heard a little bit about the board process. Mine was a little different because at that point I knew every CI HUMINT collector in the company. You know, I had spent so much time with them. We'd worked together. A couple of us had deployed together. I taught a class about how to combine SIGINT and human ops. I taught a little class about how CI HUMINT guys could better protect information from SIGINT, from foreign SIGINT collection. And so I knew all these guys. And so they took it as an excuse to just haze me, right? It was an excuse to get their buddy in the ring and spend 4.5 hours poking at me and figuring out if I had the right stuff to be a part of the job. And I'm very fortunate in retrospect that they did. Because then I did the next 10 years just having the most fun of my career, right? Doing the greatest job for Marine Corps. And so I did CI HUMINT until the day I retired. And the day I retired, right, I was excited. I was ready to focus on my civilian career. I did an incredible deployment to Jordan, where I got an opportunity to do CI and force protection and HUMINT and like overt, and also like work with the embassy and I got to coordinate exercises, and it was just like, it was an incredible first and deployment as a CI human professional. I got the full width and breadth of the exposure that they could have run for me. Did a set of orders again with Nick Vidulich. This time I think he was a Chief Warrant Officer 4. I was a gunny. Where we were doing all of the vulnerability assessments for all the Marine Corps, the reserve owned equities across the country. So we just got to travel around the country and tell them how to improve their security state, do the threat vulnerability assessments. I got to spend 3 months with one of my best friends, running around the country, drinking beer and eating pretty good food, and going to some places in the country I never would have been. And then I retired. And I retired out of the DC team, out of the Marine Corps Reserve's DC team, which drills out of Anacostia Bowling. And again, like when I went to that team originally, it was a bunch of like couple guys doing CI at like a far more professional level than I ever did for the DIA. Had somebody working for OMB as like one of the program examiners, worked at the White House. I had a Marine who does lobbying for veterans health, veterans education benefits. I mean, again, just this team and every team I ever had the opportunity to deploy with or serve with, I'm very lucky that every single one of them was just this team of remarkable professionals. Today, this morning, the reason I'm wearing a collared shirt, I work for a startup now, and so I don't ever have, it's mostly like band t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops. But I'm looking to get my MBA right now. So I had my interview with a school to move forward my MBA application. And the woman I was talking with asked me something along the lines of, well, how do you what does your everyday look like? And in retrospect, my everyday for the last almost 25 years of being some sort of intelligence or security professional has been being the dumbest guy in the room and getting the opportunity to see these like wonderful, incredibly bright, before it was SIGINT professionals, and then I was CI human professionals for a little while in there. It was like some of the greatest infantry Marines that the Marine Corps ever produced, teaching me about stuff that even today I don't know that I can reproduce, right? Just and now it's engineers. Now it's baby engineers. And I've made a whole career out of being the dumbest guy in the room and letting other people teach me just this cool stuff about their careers, and let me help them protect it, and let me help them keep it safe, not just for us, for the Marine Corps, for the country, but also for the company now. And like if I had one through line for my whole career, it's that. It's like I got busted down a couple times, dropped out of grad school once because it was the pandemic and my kids needed a lot more attention than grad school work needed. And every single time it felt at the time like it was just the end of the world, right? How am I ever going to survive going from an E4 to an E3? Nobody ever comes back from that. How am I ever going to survive dropping out of this fully funded grad program to take care of my kids? Well, they really struggle with something. I had at the time it was I think he was 17, so it was a 17 and 2 7-year-olds trying to figure out distance learning, and the pandemic nearly broke those kids. And so I dropped out of a fully funded grad school program. And like, that's not necessarily the most, motivating the best message to send to somebody necessarily. But for me, it's like, right now I consider myself extraordinarily blessed, extraordinarily thankful. And I'm in a cool place where my engineers get to teach me about, we build satellites. That's like that right up there with being a dinosaur wrangler and being like a space pirate, right? This is one of the coolest things that you can be as a 7-year-old. And so these engineers get to teach me about cool engineering things. I get to touch satellites all the time. And in the meantime, I get to teach them about military operations. I get to tell these kids, I don't want to call them kids, I get to teach these young engineers, right? The satellite that you're building, here's how a Marine downrange is going to use this data to keep themselves alive. This is how a Marine downrange is going to use this to keep that village from getting vaporized by the bad guy. I got to sit there and like explain order of battle and why it matters to a bunch of people that, you know, knock on wood, they never find out why they need to know that. But now I get to be a teacher and I get to be a mentor every day to people who are doing just some of the coolest, smartest work in the country, cutting edge work in the country. And I get to keep their stuff safe, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, my wife and I nerd out on space all the time. I mean, actually, that we sit down and just watch these YouTube videos on space and things that, you know, companies like SpaceX and the rest of it. Dude, it's amazing. It'll blow your hair back. Yeah.
And for a Luddite like me, right, watching these people do some of the just incredible work they do, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And to think that like I get to do my little part in it is it makes me very proud to have like struggled through and held my own and you know I like to say that I got knocked down, but like, I knocked myself down a few times, and you know I got up and I dusted myself off and I came back, and what I did was I mentored and I taught, and it's just one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Well, let me ask you, at the end of your career, 22 years in active Marines and reserves, what was your rank? What did you retire as?
So I retired as a gunnery sergeant. I retired as an E7.
That's awesome. All right. So
yeah.
You can still take your licks and come back. For anybody that's out there thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to make it past this Article 15 or, you know, this bad thing that happens to me. You can definitely come back. You just got to have some resiliency. You just got to, you know, keep pushing forward.
Well, and one of the things that really, you know, continues to bring me joy is that I just had a reserve Marine out to my house last weekend. Flew out from DC, stayed with me through the weekend. One of the guys I used to mentor while we were both in the reserves together. Again, one of these like power player civil servants in DC. And we sat and we drank. We sat in my living room and we drank whiskey. And he sat on my couch behind me in my office, and he looked at what I was doing. And he's starting to plan his 5, 10, 15, 20, I don't know, whenever he exits, starting to plan his exit. And I get to be a mentor again. And he knows that I was just absolutely, you know, I was a fuck up more than I wasn't a fuck up throughout most of my Marine Corps career. And he doesn't care. I'm giving him good advice that he's taken home, and he's using it with his kids, and he's using it in his home, and he's using it in his community. And he's using it at work, at Marine Corps and Govy side. And I've got, you know, old warrant officers reaching out to me to talk to me about, you know, hey, I'm doing this thing for the Bureau. Talk to me about what you're doing right now with educating people on X. Or talk to me about your industrial security program. I'm interested as to what you're doing right now and kind of the neat, weird way that you're teaching your folks. Absolutely. But come over and you don't drink. Let's sit and have a root beer. Let's talk through it. Right. I'm in a very privileged place.
That's awesome, Nick. Thank God you didn't like shoot your toe off back in 2001,
Yep.
and thank God thank God you decided to stop looking at your shoes and go ahead and take some advice and roll into the CI HUMINT world. But you
That's
said
exactly
a
right.
couple of things that I found interesting, right? You always felt like you were the dumbest guy in the room. I can't imagine that, right? So, but you onboarded a lot of mentorship, to kind of get you
Sure.
to where you were going to go. But now, we're talking about the mentorship that you're providing to everyone, right? So at some point in everybody's career, you serve long enough, you go from the mentee to the mentor. Was there like can you describe how that that transition took place? Was it something that you realized as it was happening? And talk about that a little bit.
It's weird. So it's a great question. It came in waves. So I liked to party. I think is the polite way of saying it on a podcast like this when I was growing up. And it's my experience that in MI, you get two types of people. You get people who, before they joined the military, before I joined the Marine Corps, you get the people who had never touched a drug or never drank in their entire life. And they were coming in just these life-wise vestigial virgins. And then you got the rest of us who were, I still don't know entirely to this day how I got a clearance. And so one of my Marines, again, decades ago at this point, got busted for doing drugs. Got kicked out of the Marine Corps. And we were in one of these, like, the most secure places, one of those, you look at the listicles about the most secure places in the world, and it was one of those. And he got kicked out of the Marine Corps and went home. And we sat and talked one night about, like, what's he going to do with his life? And I was still in the Marine Corps at that point. And, I drank, but obviously, I haven't touched a drug since June 8th, 2001. And so he just needed to know, like, things were going to be okay. And there I was, I think probably a freshly minted corporal. So fresh-faced E4, telling this guy, like, things are going to be all right. Like, this isn't the end of the world. And, repeating the line that I'd have to tell myself 4 or 5 times throughout the rest of my career. Things I would have to tell my kids and still have to tell my kids on a regular basis. And so when it came to the life management stuff, I've been there for a while. And that's the stuff I really like to mentor. I really like to see people come back and say, hey, that thing that you told me to do, turns out it really worked, and, like, my whole life is better.
That's
I
awesome.
know, and I'm stoked for you.
Yeah.
And then when it came to, like, professional stuff, so Dan Williams, right? And I'll tell him this when we do this Marine Jamboree here in a couple of weeks. Right around when I was transitioning to CI HUMINT, he was the senior collector at Marco Res. And so there I am, like, looking at this kind of, like, goofy, shining golden statue on the hill of, like, just one of the greatest collectors in the community. And just a down-to-earth guy who just wanted to mentor, just wanted to teach, just wanted to help, just wanted to feed us baby birds. And, I listened to your interview with him, kind of preparing, trying to get a kind of a baseline for how I was going to talk about things. And he was talking about how he was almost always the junior guy in the room. And what I don't think and I think is probably true for Damon, and maybe true for Mike, and certainly true for me in retrospect, is, like, I think we undercut the amount of influence we had, the amount of just indirect leadership we had on young Marines who were looking at us and saying, you know, I don't think what I did was ever that cool. I was never the cool guy. I was adjacent to some really cool guys doing some really cool stuff. And there I was, just kind of a, like, not in great shape, just getting people intel. That's all I was doing. And that's how I always viewed my career. And other people looked at that like, damn, that was really cool what you did. I don't think so, but let's sit down. I'll tell you the story, right? I'll tell you what I learned. And I hope you get something out of it. And, you know, I kissed the Blarney Stone one too many times. I don't know what it is, but like, people take the advice that about half the time I can't take myself. And they go out and they do just these righteous, cool, you know, they're death blossoming out of blacked out helos and killing all the Taliban, like just the cool stuff. And I don't know when that was exactly, but at some point I recognized that, like, these cool guys are doing cool guy stuff because at one point they looked at me like I was cool, and that is a terrifying thought. And then I just have tried to keep that. I've been trying to keep that vibe up ever since.
Well, I'm taking a look at your back wall. I mean, you know, obviously you've done some cool things.
It's mostly kids' drawings, right? It looks impressive for me.
I know better. So other people have recognized what you've done, and you know, you've gotten awards and certificates and all that. So just taking a look, and you know, what would you say was one of the coolest moments, one of those career highlights out of all 22 years that you'd like to share?
Okay. So there are two. I can point to two. And one is like strictly professional, and one is strictly personal, but it was like tied to what I was doing, right? So I'll give you three because I like to talk. When I was in Afghanistan, I was a reserve Pogue SIGINT guy who, despite my ability to talk, and I love to talk, knew when to shut up and listen and knew how to get people stuff. And then suddenly, like, some of the coolest guys in MARSOC were showing at my door and asking me, like, hey man, you want to like hide some antennas with me? Yeah, I really do. Hey, I'm going to go kill all these bad guys over there. Can you help me identify which ones are the bad guys I want to kill? I want to do that. Right. Hey, our CO just got shot, and thank God he survived. Can you show me how you were doing that weird analytic thing? And suddenly, like, again, all of these senior guys that, from my perspective, I had no business being around. I became the subject matter expert for the deployment, where I was just bouncing around the country helping people out, and it was extraordinarily important to me. And it was saving lives, right? It was doing real stuff to keep, particularly Marines, but also, like, I got to swim with an awful lot of cool Afghan kids in some really gross canals. And some of those kids didn't get schwacked because, like, we made a really safe white space bubble around those kids' homes. And coming home and realizing, like, oh shit, there's a whole generation of some of these Afghan kids that, like, I'm not the guy who saved them, but I don't know if the guy that saved them could have done what he did without at least something I gave him. And it gave me this real respect for everybody doing their part, right? You need John Rambo. You need a guy who's going to death blossom out of the helo. But, like, for the most part, that guy has 50 people behind him doing just, like, the hardest work every day, day in and day out, 25 hours a day to make sure that that guy's successful. And that goes anywhere from CI and intel professionals like us to the guy getting that guy fed, to the guy getting that guy out of the country when he's done. And it gave me a real clear idea as to I'm not, again, I would never consider myself the cool guy. But I helped a lot of cool guys do a lot of cool stuff. And that deployment really drove that home. The second, I got home from one of my deployments. I don't remember which at this point. And one of the Marines that was in one of my platoons as a reservist before I left had this downward spiral in his life. Wife was getting ready to divorce him. He was getting called back to active duty to go testify against another Marine for sexual assault. He didn't do sexual assault, the other Marine did. And his whole life was just kind of crumbling around. And I was the only person he talked to. Oh, it was after my Afghan deployment, because at one point, my wife and I were at IKEA getting furniture for the kids' rooms. And I get a call that this Marine is a danger to himself and others. And so I asked my very pregnant wife if it's okay if she goes and sits in the car outside of this Marine's house. Well, I'd go in, force my way into his house, take his guns from him, sit down, and have one of the heart-to-hearts that I've ever had with the guy. And in retrospect, it was probably dumb. And that guy was at my retirement party and didn't kill himself, didn't kill his wife, thank goodness. Lived, has a great life, and attributes him being alive to the fact that I was there for him. That rules pretty hard, right? I know a lot of folks in the service who did a lot of cool things, and I know that in my body count ledger, I've at least got one in this column, right? One that I can guarantee that I saved. So the third one, I was in Jordan. We were completely non-kinetic. It was all an advising mission. It was incredible. We worked with the King's QRF and the Royal Marines. And so I worked with the intel officer for both those units. I was also doing, CI and Force Pro. I was also doing some work through the embassy. It was a cool mission. And my twins, I'm never gonna get these ages right. They were probably 3 or 4. And my youngest, the youngest of my twins, is on the spectrum. And we had just found that out. We'd just gotten assessed right before I left for Jordan. So my wife had a lot on her plate. And I would work 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And some of that was bullshit, right? It was driving from one side of the country to the other. Some of that was I guess I've got to go make sure this, ritzy 5-star hotel down in Aqaba is safe for the Navy SEALs coming into town. Oh no, I got to stay there for 3 nights. I feel, oh dang, that's But other times it was it was work. It was hours upon hours of work and on another continent. And every single night, I smoked more cigars and probably more cigarettes than I should have. Every night I went out to the smoke pit and I lit up a cigar and I would call my kids. I would call my wife. And we'd sit and we'd talk. And, I didn't get that opportunity in Afghanistan. The technology just wasn't there either in the country at the time. But in Jordan, right, it was perfect. And I was a senior staff sergeant at the time. And our advisor team was half officers, half enlisted. And the enlisted guys were more educated than the officers, which was great. It was a lot of fun. And one of the captains, I can't remember what his role was. I could tell you his call sign because we all had stripper call sign names. Called our office the main stage, right? It was a whole thing. He comes up to me and he says, "I got to tell you, man, listening to you talk to your kids every night changed how I talk to my kids. Okay. Well, why is that? It's like, well, I just never, they're my kids. It's like, yeah. It's like, they're not people. It's like, well, okay. Dial it back. It's like, well, I started treating them like people. And you'd be amazed how, the kind of response I'm getting out of them when I call them. That's amazing. I could not be happier for you, right? I'm glad that that's something I could do for you. That's in deployment. I had to explain to a young E3 who's an intel analyst. I'm sitting there, I'm typing up a report, been out all day. All I want to do is go and sneak a beer or smoke a cigarette, do something. Not there. And he's like, hey, Nick, can you do me a favor? I'm like, yeah, just give me 5 minutes. And then I ask him. He waits real patiently. And it's probably 7 o'clock at night. He said, can you do me a favor? Can you explain to me what the problem is with the Israelis and the Jordanians? I was like, oh, man. Yeah, but we're not going to do it in here, right? Like, walk with me. Let's get out of this windowless box and let's go out there and let me teach you some history, bud. And so we sat for 2-3 hours, and instead of going to bed, I sat and talked to this kid, a little bit about the 7-Day War, a little bit about, Sykes-Picot. And again, we're still close. I think, one of those through lines is, you look at your career and you can start to see it kind of like these narratives break out. Being raised by teachers, being raised in a teaching family, turns out that, I don't know, something rubbed off. And even though I never wanted to be, like, I did want to be a teacher, but I didn't want to get paid like a teacher.
Well, I think it made you a lifelong learner. I mean, so
I think you're probably right.
Right. So it's not so much the teaching part, it's just learning and then sharing. And so that's kind of a cool way of looking at it.
No, I think you're right. I also think I think it made me a better CI HUMINT guy, because, and you both know as well as I will, as well as I do. I just think every person I meet is just like, all I want to do is hear your story. All I want to do is hear you talk about what you've got going on in your life. It's just one of the coolest things to hear people talk about their lives.
Maybe you should start a podcast.
Oh God, no. I mean, listen, there are enough like straight white veterans doing podcasts. Present company excluded. You guys are doing great. I love your podcast. I can't add to this mess. But now I get to teach engineers. Now I get to teach my kids. Now I get to be a real part of a lot of communities, and I get to learn a lot. I get to teach a lot, and yeah, I don't know. It's as happy as a dude could be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our listeners are young folks trying to figure out what they're interested in counterintelligence. That's what kind of drives a lot of people our way. So,
Sure.
So counterintelligence kind of came to you, right? It's not something that you sought out. Obviously, you loved it once you landed in there, and then you when you retired, you ended up in a career where you're kind of still applying that craft, in the corporate world. So, some of our listeners, they may not be interested in the military. They're more interested in the corporate world. So, can you talk a little bit about what the sort of a synergy is, or what you brought from your military CI and HUMINT experience to industry, and how that kind of overlaps?
Absolutely. I think I'll make a controversial statement about CI in industry, and it's not something I think we should be doing. Right. And I know that's like, I know that's at the core.
Well, that's it, folks. So Nick, now tell us more, man. I want to hear this.
We're sensors, right? We should never. I'm never, God willing, I am never going to catch a spy. Right? I don't have a strike force. I don't have a SWAT team. I don't have guys waiting in the wings to go and do the work for Queen and Country. What I have is I have a lot of folks who I could either alienate by ignoring them and by treating them like spies and treating them like the enemy, or I could turn each one of those people into just an exquisite censor, where they are reporting to me every single time a blade of grass is bent the wrong way. And what that is that's like that is an exercise in building trust. As far as like my relationship, right? So we're a defense contractor. So I have a more defined relationship with the defense community, the intelligence community, than many companies. But like me scaring my poor baby engineers and threatening them and being like, nerd, you better tell me if some bad guy comes to talk to you. The way that counterintelligence is looked at oftentimes does nobody any good. Or what I can do is I can teach these kids. I taught them the HUMINT cycle last year, right? I teach them what the value of emissions control when it comes to your RF emissions looks like. I teach them like, hey, here's why just keeping our basic business pursuits and practices close hold, why that's valuable, and how somebody else could get that and just fuck up our day. And why do I do that, right? Because like treating them, I think zero trust is wrong. I think zero trust is misguided. Because we spend so much money and so much time and so much effort developing these incredible practitioners of their own craft, but then B, these exquisite sensors, better than anything you can put in space. And they tell me when they have problems, and they tell me when somebody is acting weird at a coffee shop, and they tell me when they don't feel comfortable with something that's happening while they're driving home from work. Because what I've done is I've created this environment where I'm not doing CI in the workplace. I'm teaching them and I'm guiding them and I'm providing them an outlet where they can tell me about the scary shit. And I don't hide it. I let them know, like, hey, by the way, this is absolutely something I'm going to report to the government because this is scary. And they know that. But then they want to come to me, right? And the spy's never going to come to me. The spy's never going to come to me and talk to me. I'm really feeling like I need to give some information to China. That guy was never going to come to me anyway. And that guy was never going to, right? But everybody else, when they notice that guy being weird, they're going to tell me now. Too many counterintelligence practitioners in our field think that what we do is like too super secret to talk about with anybody. And I've got to be locked in my own windowless room, and I've got to put on my fedora, and do my spy versus spy thing, and try and go out there and catch a spy. And like, it's so refreshing seeing kids come and tell you like reportable stuff, because you taught them that it's reportable, and they want you to know. You don't even have to suss it out of them. Then like I'll do a shameless plug for your product. That's where something like 351X becomes really valuable, is having a platform where you can plug in all of that stuff that people are giving you, right? So it's not just Excel documents and Word spreadsheets and Post-it notes and backs and actants and stuff like that. You can start to build a really cohesive idea as to what your people are going through. And so you're as much a therapist as you are anything. But you're never going to catch a spy. Leave that to the government. They should be doing that kind of analysis. I should be just feeding the machine.
I don't hate. I mean, it sounds like you're running a defensive counterintelligence program, though.
It does sound like I'm running a defensive counterintelligence program, doesn't it? Right.
I mean, and that's what we do as defensive counterintelligence professionals.
I know.
I mean, we train, we mentor, we teach, we highlight the threats and risks, and then we hope that, you know, through the course of their day-to-day activities, they what I like to say is R3. Recognize when threats and risks present themselves, react to it properly, and then report it back to me. That's all. That's all we want you to do. It's not that spooky and cool. I mean, it's just basic security counterintelligence.
It's just it's security consciousness. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's 100% defensive counterintelligence. And when the minute you call it counterintelligence in almost any boardroom, somebody wants you deep diving into their background.
Yeah.
And you know, I've got lots of friends of mine who are in the bureau, and I love my bureau brother. And when they come to industry, all they want to do is catch a spy. And all I want to do is just build. The catchphrase in our office is build higher walls, dig deeper moats. Right? Just build higher walls, dig deeper moats. Leave it to somebody else to go do they can fight the war outside of the moat. But my job is to make sure that like my team and our information and our infrastructure and our people, right, the relationships that we have with other companies in the government, that's all safe here in the inner sanctum. And what happens out there, that's somebody else's bag. But we're all going to be safe and warm here in the middle of the castle.
We've really cracked the code. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, you mentioned it up front, you know, it's trust, right? You know, I mean,
Trust.
You know, and so it's what you've built, you know, in your instance is a culture of trust, right? I mean, people are coming to you, and I would submit to all those people out there that are, you know, whether they're on active duty or whether they're, you know, moving into industry, is that, you know, that's your challenge. I mean, you've got to be able to, whether it's given to you as a mandate to build a culture of trust. I mean, that's what you got to do, right? Because people aren't going to come to you if they don't trust you. So
Absolutely.
kudos to you. Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Well, Nick, we're starting to get close to time. We try to keep these podcasts around an hour. Our audience complains a little bit. So, So what a fascinating story. Thank you so much. I heard bits and pieces of it, but I didn't know the whole story. Now I do. And I can't wait to learn more, and we will learn more as we dig a little bit deeper into the USMCCI panel. But if anybody wanted to reach out to you and pick your brain, maybe get some mentorship or ask a question about Marine Corps counterintelligence or SIGINT, which doesn't exist anymore, apparently.
Apparently not, but I mean, I'm still happy to talk about it, right?
Yeah. How could they get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll do show notes someplace where my last name's impossible. Nobody can find it if they were trying. And then I'm happy to give you all my email. It's Nicholas, NICHOLAS .Vidulich, V as in Victor, I, D as in David, ULICH @gmail.com. And that's my professional email. That's what I use for not actively work stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your story. I mean, it's the ups and downs. It's a great story. You made the most of it. And obviously your wall suggests that you're very successful despite being a very humble person as well. So
no, I appreciate that, Ryan. And I will say, like, just on our way out, right? Like, if you can look back on any period of your time and say, I built that community, I protected that community was better when I left, right? I think that's the height of me personally. I think that's the height of what it means to be a man, right?
Yeah.
Is to be able to look back on something like that.
Well, you have a lot to look back on. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And fascinated to learn more in the coming weeks. So, well, Scott, another great episode. It was a fun conversation with Nick. I'm finally glad that we got it done. It's taken a long time to get to this point. Final thoughts?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks for letting me participate. It was great to talk to you, Nick. Sage advice, both personal and professional for our audience. So thank you very much. And for our audience, you tune in because we're a counterintelligence podcast, right? CI Press. So I assume you love counterintelligence. If you do, right, listen to us on CI Press, right, and then look at all of the articles and the things that we publish on our IXN Dispatch, right? So whether you want to find our CI Press podcast or IXN Dispatch and join our community to get access to those articles and to get access to a community where we can have sort of discussions amongst our professional peers, in a sort of as private online as you can get in a Discord channel. Check out our website, ixnsolutions.com. ixnsolutions.com will give you the links to get to all that good stuff. So we want to see you on there. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Nick said. Check out 351X. I mean, it's there for you. We're building an empire with 351X just to protect our national security, our defense industrial base. And with that, we'll end it the same way that we always do. Of course, the world's in turmoil again with the Iran war and things going on. So keep your head on a swivel. And, R3, recognize when a threat or risk presents itself, react to it appropriately, and then report it to security professionals so they could do something about it. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you the next time.